You're listening to the Jōrni Podcast. Ever wonder why doing all the right things still leaves so many women feeling unwell? Join me for an empowering journey today. This episode contains adult subject matter and some listeners may be triggered by this content. Listener discretion is advised. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer, and with decades of experience with sadness, pain, anxiety, and stress, I finally figured out how to leave all that behind. And this podcast shows you how to break free permanently so you can reclaim your sanity and find the self-esteem and energy to go after the life you desire. With real talk about mental health, holistic healing, and the tough journey of coming out the other end. This is the Jōrni Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. There are parts of the conversation around women's health that often go unspoken. Experiences are dismissed, misunderstood, or never fully explored. In this episode, we dive into the gaps many women face when navigating their bodies, especially in high-pressure environments where performance is praised but well-being is rarely prioritized. What unfolds is an honest look at what gets left out of mainstream health narratives and why it matters. Allie is a women's health and transformation coach who helps high-achieving women heal their metabolism, rewire their mindset, and cultivate deep self-love from the inside out. After becoming a pro-status physique competitor, living in a world hyper-focused on aesthetics and extremes, Allie found herself burned out and disconnected from her own body. That experience became the catalyst for her to shift toward a more holistic, sustainable approach to health. Now she blends functional nutrition, fitness, and neuro-linguistic programming to help women break free from chronic stress, frustration, and burnout, and instead create lasting health, energy, and confidence. Here is my interview with Allie. Hi, Allie. It's so great to have you on the podcast today. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because missing links in women's health is, of course, something I'm really passionate about. So I'm excited to dive in with you and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Petra.
Yeah, it's my absolute pleasure. Let's start off with a little bit about yourself. Maybe you can give our listeners an idea of where your journey started or how your journey started and how that connects with what you do today, and maybe give our listeners a bit of an idea of what it is that you do today as well.
Absolutely. So, hi, everybody. For those of you that are listening, my name is Allie. I'm a functional health and fitness coach. My story really starts like most people when I was younger. I grew up as an athlete, so I always valued physical fitness. I was very into sports. I really enjoyed the physical movement aspect. Fast forward to 22 years old, I was just fresh out of college, and my mom was diagnosed with a rare form of brain cancer. I moved across the country, became one of her primary caregivers. And through that process, I really started to ask the questions of what makes somebody healthy. So my mom was someone who was extremely healthy by, Western medical standards. So the fact that she would get a diagnosis like this just so suddenly, she was also very, very young, relatively speaking. It just really threw me into this loop of just trying to find answers. Well, of course, when you go to Western medicine and you ask, why does this happen? They don't have answers. And so I really started on a path of just self-research, really as a coping mechanism, but really wanting to understand why this was happening. How can I prevent this from, happening to myself, to the people that I love? What does it really mean to be healthy? And through that process, I learned so much about functional nutrition, stress management, the role that environment plays in our health and well-being, not just from a mental and emotional perspective, although that's a huge part of it, but what environmental toxins, how those interplay with various systems in the body, how stress interplays, all of these things. And the more that I learned, truthfully, the more mad that I became that we're not talking about these things in the traditional medical system. And I became angry because it's one of those things that, I for most of you listening, you can probably relate, like you don't know what you don't know. So when you don't even know what questions to ask or where to seek answers, and then you learn later, it can be very frustrating because the whole time I wish there would have been somebody who was talking to us about the foods that my mom should or shouldn't be eating while she's going through chemotherapy, what's fueling the cancer, what's, quote, starving the cancer, how can we help her on a mental and emotional level? And so there were just so many things that I started to learn. Now, simultaneously, I was not in the healthiest place in my life. I had just gotten out of college. I was a heavy alcohol user on the weekends. I was just eating to essentially satisfy my emotions at that point in life. And I found myself after my mom passed in a dark place mentally, emotionally, and physically. I was overweight. I was exhausted. And I remember sitting on a friend's bed, just hanging out with her. And I just had this thought come to me that, like, if this is how life was going to feel, like I didn't want to do it anymore. And I don't mean that in a dark way, but I just knew something had to shift because I was like, I'm too young to feel this way. Now I know that, you're always too young to feel that way. You can always feel healthy and vibrant at any age in life. And I just knew something had to shift. So I hired my first health and fitness coach. I went back to my roots, which was, again, that was fitness, exercise, sport. And so I hired a personal trainer. She talked me into doing bodybuilding, which I thought was an awful and terrifying idea. But I figured, you know what? I need something to work toward. Started working toward that, competed for about 2 years, and it really served me at that point in life. It gave me an outlet to work toward. However, in that process, I saw the pendulum swing from the side of just being very unhealthy to now being overly obsessed with my health. My whole life revolved around food, when my next meal was going to be. I developed low-level body dysmorphia. I was fortunate to not actually have an eating disorder, but I definitely had disordered eating patterns. And I was just so hyper, fixated on health and aesthetics. And after doing my second competition and getting my pro card, I realized it was probably time for me to step back and take a break, which allowed me to shift my focus more into developing my professional passion, which is helping women find that true balance and helping them integrate what it means to be healthy for them. So that's physically, mentally, emotionally, all of those things. So what I help women with now and how my work has evolved is really helping women to optimize their metabolism, up-level their mindset, and really just shift from that feeling of I'm surviving in life to I'm thriving in life.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm so sorry to hear about your journey with losing your own mom. And that's something that you don't forget about and something that really shapes you, I think, as a human being as well, and sent you on another piece of your journey to find more answers. So yeah, I can only imagine how absolutely devastating and difficult that was. So thank you for sharing that, and the beautiful work that now comes out of your journey helping other women find that path and find their health. So it's incredibly inspiring, and I almost want to say terrifying at the same time, because when you're looking at your health, it can be a very terrifying thing to look at, especially if you know that there are issues that you're maybe over consuming or under consuming, or you have unhealthy eating patterns, or you're not managing stress in a way that is helpful to you. It can be terrifying to look at that and say, wow, where do I even start with this whole mess? You might not be sleeping right. There may be so many things going on. So, how do you start off with, how did you start off, for example, or how do you start off with your clients when they come to you and you look at that and you go, wow, there's quite a lot of things going on. Where do we start sort of untangling that mess? And what's the first few steps that we can take as we want to come into better health?
Absolutely. I love that question. So when I'm working with clients or even if I'm just, helping somebody or advising somebody, I always like to start with what are we doing in our own life or what are we engaging in that is preventing us from healing? Because the body wants to heal, right? Like it doesn't want to be sick. It doesn't want to live in that place. However, by some of the habits that we might have or the things that we're dealing with in life externally or internally, we create barriers that make it harder for our body to do what it naturally wants to do. So I see, in our Western world, a lot of the women that come to me, they want help, they want to create these changes, but they think that they have to do, all of these extra things. And it's like, I hear this all the time where it's like, Allie, I don't know if I have time to focus on my health. And I totally get that, right? Like we have careers, we have kids, we have, taking care of families, there's responsibilities, especially, the older I get and the more responsibilities I get, I'm not 22 anymore. So my life looks very different now. So what I always like to start with individuals is looking at, all of the things in their life and what are barriers that we can just start removing so that they don't feel like they have to spend an extra 5 hours a week working out or spend a ton of extra time doing XYZ. I also think that in my professional and personal experience that the results are so much better that way because like I like to equate it to like a fire. Let's say if you have a fire that's being fueled by propane and you're trying to put it out with water, like the flame will go away for a second and it's just going to come right back up. So it's like if we have these barriers to healing, yet we're trying to force ourselves to go to the gym 5 days a week, or we're trying to stick to a really strict diet, like those are only going to have a very minimal impact until we remove the barriers that are preventing our body from naturally trying to do what it wants to do in the first place. And so when I work with a client, we do a really in-depth intake process that's about 5 to 7 days long. We look at a ton of different angles from health history to symptomology. If they have lab tests, great. If they don't and they want to get them, we can help them with that as well. I put them through a gut health assessment. I really value the relationship with the client too, because I want to know, what are their relationships like? What is their work environment like? How do they feel about those things? Are they carrying have they been through traumatic events and are they still carrying a lot of that emotional weight? Because those can be barriers to healing as well. And so I like to, again, kind of start with a more reductionist approach and look at what can we take away. So that way, again, we're not just piling on this like massive to-do list that in and of itself, in my opinion, creates additional barriers to healing. So, what can we remove from a client's life to just help them naturally start to thrive? And then in my experience, that typically opens up more physical, mental, and emotional capacity to start adopting new behaviors and new actions.
Yeah, I like that because that is one of the things that stresses me out when I have to think of, oh my goodness, what I have to go to the gym now for 1 hour. And then I have to make a meal plan because I have to eat only these specific things that are really healthy. And how do I do that? Because other people in my household don't want to eat that. So it kind of starts a whole thing in my head. Like, also, it's too complicated. I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. So I really appreciate that you look
Yeah,
at all of that and pick people up where they are, and make
for
that
sure.
work in their
And
lives.
I always tell people too, if your like health routine is making you more stressed out, then like we're doing the opposite of what we want to be doing. So
Yeah.
it's that fine line of like, okay, if somebody is not sleeping well, maybe that's the first thing we focus on. Now, why are they not sleeping well? And are there things that we can start to remove or dissect in order to help them naturally do that one thing better? So, there's different individuals. I find some people really have like the exercise component locked in, but like this other area is really a struggle for them. So in that intake process, and as I get to know a client, we kind of determine what's going to be the biggest opportunity for initial success.
Yeah. And I feel that also will build better consistency. If you are forcing yourself to do something, just in my own experience, it tends to not last very long. So if we're building something that actually works with our lives and we're addressing some of those barriers and then actually it feels like it flows after, I think we're way more likely to adopt that as a healthy lifestyle rather than feeling like that's forced on us. So I like that approach a lot. Now, you've touched throughout that there are barriers to healing for people. You've mentioned a few of them. What are some of the common ones that you see in your work and maybe even some of the ones that you yourself encountered because it sounds like you also found some of those barriers in your own journey. So what are some of the more common things that you run across when you work with clients or for yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we have, nutrition and physical movement, whether that's excess movement, overtraining, or perhaps if you're a little bit more sedentary and, you work a desk job and you're not very active, like those things can be barriers. Also, in the Western world, at least in America, we tend to not have the highest quality diets as, an overall theme. And so again, those things can prevent the body from having the nutrients that it needs. And again, performing in the way that it naturally wants to perform at an optimal level. And so those are kind of the things that people will come to me and say like, oh, I need help with my nutrition. I need help with my workouts. Those can absolutely be barriers. And oftentimes to some degree they are. However, I find that in today's day with women in particular, that things like, chronic stress, just mental and emotional challenges, and those areas are often very overlooked barriers that even when healing happens, will prevent it from happening to the full degree that it can happen. And so I know that, nowadays we're talking a lot more about stress management. We're talking about nervous system regulation. We're talking about a lot of these things online, which I think is great. But historically, they've been things that I think people have kind of glossed over or don't fully understand how it's actually affecting their body at a physiological level and aesthetically. So I have a client or had a client rather, and we did all of these things. She was making great progress. There was 1 month where we changed nothing on her nutrition, nothing on her exercise plan, none of that. She quit a job that was extremely stressful to her. Now, I understand not everybody can just quit their job. But the change over a 1 month period of her physical progress, her energy levels, all of these things, it was astounding to me just simply by removing herself from the environment that was keeping her in like this low grade chronic state of hypervigilance. Like I have to be ready for the next thing. It was a very demanding job. She was at a director level and you could just tell her system was constantly in this low grade fight or flight, ready for the next thing that was going to come up. Now, that's not how we are hardwired to, spend our lives. That we're meant for acute bouts of stress, not chronic bouts of stress. And so I think that we're becoming a lot more attuned to that. But when it comes to stress management, things in our external world, whether that's relationships, jobs, things that are really draining us or things that we would maybe, consider toxic, those things affect people's health a lot more than they realize. And not just mental and emotional health, it affects your physical health as well. So those are big barriers that I think we're starting to talk about more. But, again, like I mentioned earlier, most of the women that come to me are overworked, they're under recovered, they're just depleted across all fronts. And so when we can start to remove some of those things that are depleting them, they naturally start to feel better, perform better, they have more energy to do the other things that, we need to do to help them get to where they want to be.
That's a really great point because I do feel that stress is underlying a lot of our challenges. And as you said, not just mental and emotional, but also a lot of chronic illnesses, physical challenges. They often come because stress is unresolved and we're unable to manage it. So yeah, that's a really great point. Now, as you mentioned, your client was able to quit her job, but many people have this chronic stress and they're just not able to actually resolve it. They might have newborns or challenges with their children or are caregivers, as was in your case, which can also be very depleting. And there might not be anything that they can do about that in the moment, or they may not be able to quit their job, or they might not have a job and have that stress of having to find a job. So in those situations where we feel that we just can't change that situation that is causing us stress, are there things that we can do to help manage that? I mean, we can certainly, like you said, work with our nutrition or exercise, sleep, things like that. Are there any other maybe mental or emotional things we can do in those situations?
Absolutely. So again, like when I'm working with a client on the stress management front, I like to do like a stress inventory first and foremost. So we identify, what are our top stressors? Again, can we kind of like mitigate this or get rid of it? And if the answer is no, which in all of the cases that you mentioned, that's not feasible. And then I like to ask clients or work with them on, okay, well, how can we do things that kind of counteract the stress first and foremost? And also, secondly, how can we maybe shift our perception of the stress? If we know that it's not something that we can control, how can we shift our focus back to what it is that we can control? So, on kind of both of those themes, sometimes it is like from more of a how can we like better manage the stress? Maybe it is going for more walks, or instead of engaging in intense exercise, because that in and of itself is a stressor, maybe it's finding a more enjoyable way to move your body. Maybe it's laughing with friends. I think that joy, just experiencing joy and having fun is like literally the antidote to anger, sadness, stress, all of these, more negative emotions that we experience in this lifetime. And so I sometimes will give clients homework of like, what is one thing that you can do for an hour this week that just you're doing it for the sake of having joy, not to check something off your to-do list, not for the sake of productivity or making money or any of these other things. And I also understand, when you're going through really challenging periods of time, or, you're a caregiver, you are dealing with grief or you're dealing with loss, it can feel like nothing is going to bring you joy. But I always encourage clients to just try, right? Like even one, like I remember having a day where I was just down and I was watching some stand-up comedy special and I was just like, I'm probably not going to laugh at this. Like one joke and just like one laugh, and I felt so much better, so much lighter. So like, is there something that we can do to help shift your physiological state so that you are having a different experience in the current reality that you're in? And then on more of the mindset front, so I didn't mention this earlier, I'm also a certified master NLP or neuro-linguistic programming practitioner. Not going to say that 10 times fast. And so I do a lot of work with clients on mindset. And so again, we also look at, what is our perception of this stressor? Like, can we shift this to view it as more of an opportunity for growth or an opportunity for expansion? Or can we reframe the way that we're thinking about this, since we can't actually get rid of it? And that does tend to help quite a bit. And then, I always encourage clients to, if you need additional help in a more therapeutic realm, like that's something I'm very, very keen to work closely with clients on, because I do think for some individuals who are dealing with really deep challenges in life and have a lot of that stress, sometimes they need that component as well.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think as women, we tend to feel a lot of that pressure because not only, as you said, do we have careers, but there's the household component, the family component. There are a lot of things that come together usually in our lives. So there's ample opportunity for stress to creep in and for us to find ways to manage that. So those are some really great ways, I think, to get started. And of course, working with you, dive into those a little bit deeper as well. Now, one of the things that I am wondering about, and especially because you work with women, is hormones. And in your journey that you dove into for after your mother passed away and for your own health, have you come across hormones playing any part in our health, and how does that affect us, especially as women? Because I feel like we sort of get the short end of the stick when it comes to hormones. So how does that figure into our health journey? And is that an impactful thing that we should be looking at or looking after?
Absolutely. So your hormones are going to, and when we say hormones, we have so many different hormones, right? Like most of the time when we say hormones, we think of our sex hormones. So your testosterone, your progesterone, your estradiol, but we have our thyroid hormones, we have cortisol, we have insulin, things like that. So there's so many different factors when we're talking about hormones, but they absolutely will impact your energy levels, your cognitive clarity. Like a lot of women who have challenges with hormones will have brain fog, or they feel like, ugh, like I'm just in a lull. Again, like your ability to effectively lose weight, if that's a goal, how well your metabolism is functioning, those all have a hormonal component. Now, the flip to that is you see a lot of individuals who want to address their hormones or want to dive into that deeper. And it's like, I get questions all the time. It's like, what supplement should I take for my hormones? Or how can I XYZ? And what a lot of people don't realize is your hormones are essentially just responding to the environment that they're in. So hormones have a very delicate balance. And, working with like a trained physician or somebody, if you're going to actually do like some sort of hormone replacement or some like direct manipulation of hormones, you want to be very careful and very important on how you're approaching that. But essentially, our hormones are just responding to everything. They're responding to our stress levels. They're responding to our sleep. They're responding to our blood sugar regulation. They're responding to what's going on in our gut. Our gut health plays a really critical component or a critical role in how we detoxify hormones, how we convert certain hormones. And so instead of jumping, if somebody wants to work on hormone balance or hormone regulation, instead of jumping straight to that, there's like 5 steps prior that we always want to look at to make sure that, are we recovering properly? Are we giving our body the adequate building blocks through our nutrition? So our vitamins, our minerals, our fatty acids, our hormones are built on fatty acids. And so we want to make sure, like the low fat craze of the like 1990s just did a number on a lot of people's hormones. It was not great. And so we want to make sure we're getting those raw building blocks so that we can, again, support our body in doing what it naturally wants to do. like I mentioned, blood sugar regulation, making sure that we are moving, but we're not, overtraining, we're not overextending ourselves. Inflammation is going to be a really big driver in hormonal imbalance or dysregulation if we have high levels of that. And so we want to address those things first. But all of those things, the great news is a lot of women can actually really, really benefit their hormones by just doing all of these other things and not ever actually necessarily, going to get some sort of, direct hormone medication or replacement or things. Now, some individuals do need that and really benefit from that, and that's great. However, I would always advise, doing the precursor work first and then reassessing, is there still a gap that needs to be addressed deeper?
That's really valuable information because when we think of, for example, also the stress hormones like cortisol or adrenaline, then oh, what supplements? Oh, ashwagandha or this or that, right? What can I take to make this go away? But very important that we need to be looking at some foundational pieces, it sounds like, before we start jumping into that. So,
Right.
is there some common mistakes and I don't really want to call them mistakes because most people don't do things on purpose. It's because of what you said. We don't know what we don't know. And that's why we do certain things in a certain order. But are there some things that you see clients doing across the board where you're like, no, we could optimize that, or maybe we start on a different piece where people really think, oh, this is good for my well-being, but really we're maybe starting on the wrong end, or we're starting with the wrong piece. Are there some things that you commonly see in your client journeys?
That's a great question. The first thing that comes to mind, and this actually truthfully isn't something I see a lot in my client journeys, but I see it a lot online, and that's like these more intense biohacking modalities. So things like cold plunging, like those are really beneficial for certain people at certain times. Now, I can tell you in my own personal experience, if I am really stressed out, I've got a lot going on in life, like my nervous system is not super regulated and I go do a cold plunge, I will literally get sick the next day because my immune system is already like so downregulated from all of the stress that I'm experiencing. So there are things like that where I think, when you are on social media or you're online, you think, oh my gosh, this thing is going to be the answer, or this, this device or this whatever is going to fix XYZ. And the reality is those are all beneficial things that can complement your health journey and certainly, kind of take it to the next level. But the foundations are the foundations for a reason. So like in the States, we love our NBA, like professional basketball league. And I always tell clients, like, those players, they make millions of dollars playing this game and they still go practice free throws. They've been practicing free throws for like 25 years now. They practice it because it's a fundamental like part of the game and the foundations matter. So like doing the foundations really well makes a big, big impact. So when we're talking about, again, where to start or, kind of common mistakes, I think a lot of it is just overlooking the impact of, you're getting quality sleep, trying again to mitigate your stress as best you can, manage what you can't get rid of, focusing on high quality whole foods, making sure that you're nourishing yourself. I see so many women that come to me too, and they want to lose weight, they want to build muscle, XYZ, and they're constantly depleting, they're constantly dieting, and that is going to create challenges with your metabolism, with your, again, hormone function down the line, if that's the state that we're chronically living in, because as a woman, our body is not designed to be in a state of depletion for long periods of time. And so a lot of times with clients, we are first focusing on how do we nourish you more? How do we get more of these great things in? And again, remove those things that are keeping us stuck. So I think, for women, for anybody really, but especially women who are looking to get started or like, what am I doing wrong? Because I'm not getting the results I want. Just going back to those foundations and getting really good at them. And I can tell you, they're not sexy, they're boring, they're mundane, but like most things in life, when you can master that aspect, you're not going to have to fixate on the other things as much, and you're not going to have to continue to look for answers. So I think that I also see this as well. We constantly are seeking what's the next thing, and it's like bringing that mentality back and just getting back to like, what do I feel like I need internally right now? What's going to best serve my body physically, mentally, emotionally, and how can I focus on that and honor that and just kind of let all these other like hype things and all these fads and these trends, just let them be out there and come back to yourself.
Yeah, I do really appreciate that. And it does make me think also that maybe what women need more is also I want to say permission to just look inside and be intuitive about what we need, right? this is something that we often forget or unlearn, or maybe we're not allowed to just be intuitive in a lot of the cases because a lot is being demanded of us. But to really build that intuition and that awareness again, because your body actually communicates a lot. It does really, like you said, when you go cold plunging after you're really stressed out, and that happens to me too. Next day I'm sick. That's
Yeah.
exactly how it goes. But now I know that because my body has given me the signs that it needs a bit more TLC, or it needs a bit more better food. Maybe I've been sloppy, and how I've been nourishing myself because I was busy, or I didn't get enough sleep for maybe a week or so. But the body communicates all of that. So I feel like there's this awareness piece also where really giving ourselves permission to listen again, to feel again, to really connect with that and see what the body is communicating, and really feel comfortable to follow those little signs, even if that means saying, I would love to come out for a glass of wine tonight, but I need to look after myself for this half hour. I need some me time. These are difficult things to say, or maybe those boundaries to set, but I think they are part of those foundations that you're talking about, of setting those. Yeah.
Absolutely. I love that you bring that up because I think, like, to your point about boundaries, slowing down and learning how to lovingly say no and set those boundaries has been one of the biggest game changers for me personally in my health journey the last couple of years. So, absolutely, like, there's so much value in that.
Yeah, it can be a little bit scary when you first start out, but I get the feeling that nowadays a lot of women actually understand when you tell them, I need a little bit of time to recover. I need a little bit of time to work on my nervous system, or whatever it is that you'd like to do. I think there's a lot more understanding now, whereas maybe even a few years ago, people just thought that was kind of rude if you were turning them down. But now I feel there's a bit more openness to that too, which it's a good sign.
I completely agree. I find with my friends, it's like one of us will be like, I think I need to take the night off. And the other one's like, oh, thank God. So do I. I
Yes.
almost feel like there's like that reciprocity of like, oh, like you, and when you get on the note of giving yourself permission, when you give yourself permission to do that, you give other women permission to do it as well. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, that's true. I'm sometimes relieved when other people
Yes.
need to self-care.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, that is so true. Wow, wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing all these insights with us, and of course, all the wisdom that you've gathered on your journey. So, if our listeners are curious, and I think a lot of our listeners are women, and this would probably be something that's right up their alley. So, how can they work with you? What kind of programs and services do you offer?
Absolutely. So currently I work one-on-one with clients. I do have a program called Love Yourself Lean. It is a fusion of NLP and deep mindset work with functional nutrition, fitness, and lifestyle. So really helping women bridge the gap between what they're experiencing in their mental and emotional state, and then what they're experiencing physically, and how we can kind of combine those to get them the best results possible so they can feel their best, show up their best, and essentially just be the most powerful version of themselves in their own life, whatever that means to them.
That sounds wonderful. And we, of course, will be linking to all of Allie's offerings in the show notes as well. So be sure to check there on how you can connect with her and her offerings and the one on one work that she offers. And I feel like we can all use a little bit more self care, a little bit more nourishing, be that food or our spirit or soul or whatever it is that you need. So give yourself permission to do that, and give yourself permission to look after yourself, because that can be one of the hardest things that we do is we are there for everyone else. We put everyone else first. And then when it comes to our own health, we just kind of push that aside. So here's your official permission to care for yourself, and find those things that light you up, those things that bring you joy, the things that nourish you, make you healthy and happy. So take that offer and connect with Allie and see what comes of that, and the magic that comes when you start looking after yourself. So, Allie, on that note, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you so much for sharing your journey. And as I said, the wisdom that you gathered along that path to share with other women. I feel like this is a huge topic that we need to keep highlighting as our society across the globe becomes more stressed, more ill, more chronically ill. These are things we really need to talk about. So thank you for shining a light on that. And thank you for the amazing work that you do.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Take care, Allie. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Jōrni Podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of The Jōrni on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejorni.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.